I have my guest with me, Jacqui Brauman, who is the CEO of TBA Law and the founder and CEO of Legally Wise Women. And Jackie's tip today, she's going to be talking about alternatives to going legal. Now, that sounds really interesting, Jacqui. Welcome, first of all, and thank you for your time.
You're so welcome. Glad to be here.
Good. Now, Jacqui, you say alternatives to going legal. What do you actually mean?
Well, as an owner of a law firm, it might feel strange for me to be encouraging someone not to use a law firm to deal with their matter. But the long and the short of it is that a lot of people come to get legal advice about what they should do, and basically we're referring them off to one of these non-legal pathways anyway. So, if there is more information out there about these non-legal pathways, the better. Also, in most courts, they now require you to do some kind of alternative dispute resolution before you can even get to court anyway. So why not try to resolve it that way before you get lawyers involved? And to be honest, if lawyers start negotiating and then you try and go to mediation, sometimes there's more damage done already by that point, instead of just going direct to mediation first. And if that doesn't work, then come back to your lawyer.
And you save so much money if you actually take control of the issue or the situation first up. And you know where you can go to ask the right questions to get the information that you need, because you may not need a lawyer. You may not need to go to court. You may not need to do mediation. You may not need any of that. It might be resolved quite quickly and quite easily with just a little bit of time spent on researching and asking the right questions and saving of money.
Yes, definitely.
So when you say there are places, organisations and things that you can actually go to, can you tell us a little bit about these organisations that are available to people? Because sometimes, when people are in an emotion height, they really can't think straight and they don't know what to look for.
No, that's right. And that's the thing. Someone has a problem and they're like, I need legal advice. I'll go to the first lawyer I find. And as you say, heightened emotions, not necessarily thinking straight. So I suppose I'll put them into a couple of categories. And the first category is like your government organisations that are there to help dispute resolution. So you've got your Consumer Affairs, you've got your Dispute Settlement Centre of Victoria, and you've got your ombudsmans. So those are the main core ones that are services paid for by the government that have either a free or a low-cost dispute resolution service in them. So if you're a consumer and it's a product that isn't working, or someone's not doing the service that you want, they're not fulfilling their contract, it's a Consumer Affairs. Ombudsmans cover government decisions. So if there's a council decision that you're fighting over, they cover telecommunications, insurance, financial services. So there's lots and lots of ombudsmans, and they all have a dispute resolution service. And then the Dispute Settlement Centre of Victoria, they do a lot of neighbourhood disputes. So good places to start.
Fantastic. And, you said the government pay for it, but the taxpayers pay the government to pay for these services. So it's really interesting. We actually may as well use those services that we pay for in an indirect way anyway.
So that's your first group.
Right.
And then your other group is sort of, as I said before, the alternative dispute pathways that are, I guess, usually a private service. So they're not necessarily a government paid one, although you have some that are subsidised by the government to keep the cost low. And those are your mediation centres, your individuals who are mediators. So they might not work in a mediation centre. Quite often they're registered with the Mediation Institute. And so you can go to the Mediation Institute and find a mediator to do something for you. And then collaborative practice falls within alternative dispute resolution as well, which is a really interesting process that we can talk about a little bit more later.
Mm-hmm.
What you said before about lower costs is good to keep in mind, because if you go to a mediator and a mediator says, oh, look, it's going to be $2,000 to do a mediation for the full day. And you're like, whoa, that's a lot of money. If you resolve it on that day for $2,000, that is a fantastic result. And usually you split the $2,000 between you. So it's only $1,000 each. Whereas if you went to a lawyer and they say, oh, look, I can do an initial letter for $450. Oh, well, that didn't resolve it. Well, another letter's this, another letter's this, another letter's this. Oh, we've spent $2,000 now. Now it's time to go to court. And so you can see that those costs would quickly mount up. So even though the initial shock to go to a private mediator might be, oh, that's a little bit much, it's cheaper to resolve it upfront. And there's more costs than just financial costs of something being prolonged.
And the cost is not just financial, it's the emotional, it's the ripple effect of families and friends, whomever is involved in it. So there is a kind of a ripple effect there somewhere along the line if it's not resolved quickly. Yeah. What other organisations do we need to be aware of?
For small business, there's the Small Business Commissioner. There's also Ombudsman for small business as well. It's called the Family and Small Business Ombudsman because it's supposed to be, resolve disputes within a business in terms of like a family business or something like that. Those are really great places also to start for small business. Then for separation, for example, there are also some really interesting little tech tools that are starting to pop up. So you might be able to use a service, for example, like Amica. It is a piece of AI that's been developed, and it's basically a questionnaire that will lead you through. Then you invite the other party to participate in the AI tool as well. Once it has all the information, it spits out to you what is fair. And so it's a robot that's telling you. It's a non-emotional thing. So that is also another really cheap and easy way potentially of starting a process with someone that you may have separated from and may not be in like a really high conflict, but just like, we've just got to get this done. I don't particularly want to talk to you. Let's do it through an AI tool. And you can feel sort of reassured that there's no outside emotional or other interests being involved.
There wouldn't be any outside influences because a robot has no emotion. It just answers the questions and spits out, as you say, some information that you can look at. If you're not satisfied with that, then you can take it further. But it's a good way. I mean, it's only time. Does it cost to use the AI tool?
It's on a scale. So for some people, it might not cost anything. For others, depending on how big the property pool is, it sort of has a stepped up.
Right. Yeah. So there is, and that's fair enough, I suppose. It is a service that's being provided. Someone's had to put it together. It is being provided so that you can utilise it and get rid of the process quite quickly if there's an amicable relationship that's split, but they just don't want to deal with the issues that at hand. Yeah. Okay. What else is there that you have or we have access to as consumers?
So I wanted to come back around to collaborative practice as well, which is a much more interesting dispute resolution process in that it helps teach you conflict resolution skills as well. So I like to think of collaboration as maybe 3 to 5 mediations. So you might come together quite a few times to deal with the issue. It might be half day or 3-hour meetings that you have at any one time. And you have a team of professionals that are helping you through it. So this is a more costly process. If you're looking at spending well over $100,000 if you went to court anyway, and the mediation didn't work, then this is your midway point to give a try before you go to court anyway. And it's more likely to resolve in that the people that you engage, the professionals, all sign an agreement to say that they will not take this matter to court. So they are actually committed to the process. So there's no other incentives for them to pull out and say, this is not working, let's go to court instead. So everyone is in to resolve it. And in the team of professionals, as well as the lawyers, you have your mediator/coach. So they take more of a coaching role in terms of coaching people how to communicate with each other. And you also have a financial independent as well. So quite often what is missing in even court proceedings is what is the financial impact going to be on all these various options that we're looking at, so we can even make an informed decision. Because quite often a lawyer's just going to go, oh, you should go for 60%. Well, what does 60% mean to me? What does it mean I end up with? What sort of assets do I end up? How is that going to look for me in 20 years' time? Like, what is this? What's the result going to be? Whereas, in fact, the percentage might not matter so much as the form of assets that you get.
And it's interesting you say, you know, you're dealing with something here in the present moment. You also have to think about what the consequences or the result of that will be in the future. And sometimes that doesn't happen, does it? It's just right here, right now, I need this, I want this now, but there's no consideration for future outcomes which support or help you down the track.
Yeah, very true. And I like to also think about it, for example, from the point of view of maybe a dispute over a will. For example, in a second marriage, if the husband has passed away and the new wife hasn't been left much and it's all gone down to the two children, for example, of the husband, there may be a lot of emotion and angst about what do I need to survive? And they may not even know what they need to survive. So they're aiming for something that is unknown. So if they just had a financial professional sit down and say, well, you know, with your life expectancy of another 25 years, in fact, this is all you need, then they can go, oh, okay, well, now I actually know sort of what I'm aiming for, instead of going, you know, I should have got 50%. Well, you might not need 50%. You may just need, you know, the superannuation that will get you over the line.
Yeah, I have an interesting question here. And it is, when you get married for a second time and you redo your will, which anyone with any sense would do, but is it that if you're married to somebody and you're living with them, cohabitating, and there are children who maybe have grown up, is it reasonable that that parent who creates, and I'm just trying to get my head around this, creates the will, is it that they don't pass it on to their wife, and then down the track when the wife dies or passes, then that's split up between the children if she has children and they have children, instead of it being split when the husband dies and the wife's still alive? Explain that, because I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about this, and it was really interesting.
Yeah. And look, it's each to their own. I think the longer someone is in their second marriage, the more likely the scenario is that it just all goes to the new spouse and the kids just have to wait, because your obligation to your spouse is to make sure that they are housed and that they have a nest egg. So that is what the court sees your obligation as to your spouse. Whereas to your adult children, the court doesn't even say that you should make sure they've got a house that has no mortgage. So if your adult children are able-bodied and they're able to go out and earn their own income, you actually don't have that greater moral obligation to them. So your first obligation really is to your spouse. But that being said, if the new spouse is only on the scene for 2 years, there might be a process where it gradually increases over time, or instead of giving them the house outright, you might just give them a life interest in the house. So at least they've got accommodation for the rest of their life. You give them some super, so they've got their nest egg, but the house is definitely coming back to your children instead of going to her children, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about if you're not married and you live with someone for over a period of 2 years, say 5 to 10 years, and what are you legally, how do you find out what your legal requirements or whatever it is? I don't even know what I want to say here, but it's really interesting. You've sort of kind of opened a can of worms, and I'm sure there are people out there that want to know this. what are you entitled to?
Yes. You would head off to a good lawyer to do your estate planning, is what you would do.
Yeah.
The 2-year mark that I mentioned before is sort of the threshold. So if you have been in a de facto relationship for 2 years, then that person's entitled to make a claim on your will if you haven't provided for them. And yes, it does sort of increase over time. You know, after, I usually say 10 years, you're all in. So your main obligation is to your spouse. So between that 2 and the 10-year period, you know, there's a bit more discretion about, well, how much or how little or what way do we do this?
Mm. And what if you get nothing?
So if the husband dies and the new wife doesn't get left anything, then she has a right to claim against the will.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
However,
Because we're talking about not going, you know, alternatives to going legal, you know, I would hope that if there is someone out there who is like, I got left out of a will, that they would look at mediation or collaborative practice before going straight to the Supreme Court. Because again, you may tear a family apart unnecessarily. People get very defensive as soon as they get a letter from a lawyer. So approaching it a different way can have a far better result.
And it could take a long time to get a result anyway, couldn't it?
Correct. That's
and long time and financial impact.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What other things do we need to be aware of as consumers?
Oh, there's so much.
All right. Jacqui is sharing some information about what you do if you need the services of the legal system, or how to avoid using the legal system. Is that about right, Jacqui?
Yeah, we've been talking about what the alternatives are to actually going to a lawyer. So if you've got a little niggly dispute, what sort of resources are available to you to try and resolve it before going to a lawyer? We rattled all of those off. I think talking now about how to engage potentially the right mediator or the right collaborative practitioner if you decide to go down the path of alternative dispute resolution, and then maybe even preparing for a mediation is probably helpful for people. What do you reckon?
Yep, that'd be great.
I said the Mediation Institute before because it is a central place where individual mediators can register, and they provide, you know, insurance and continuing education for mediators. So it's a good place to find them. Interact Support, I might just direct people to as well. Interact Support is a place where you can get a mediator to do an online mediation for you, and they tend to be a subsidized service as well, to do it all online. So you don't have to actually sit in a room with someone. And so that's something to think about when you're engaging a mediator as to whether they're going to be right for you or not, is the form that they're going to provide the mediation in. Do you want to sit down in the same room? Do you want to do an online? Do you want to do a half day? Do you want a full day? Do you want the mediator to maybe do like 2 or 3 90-minute conversations because you need time in between? And then also, what sort of skills do you need your mediator to have? Not all mediators are legally trained. There are mediators who've come potentially from having worked in government jobs. So they might have been behind the scenes in court administration. They might be psychologists. They might be experts in other sorts of areas. So if you did have something that was a little bit technical, you could look for a mediator that's actually, you know, like has been in the building industry, if it's a building thing or something like that. But then you do have your lawyers as well that are trained mediators too. So if there is something that you think is a little bit more legally technical rather than purely emotional, then maybe a lawyer's right to go. But again, I think if it's mainly like a fact and emotional dispute, potentially someone who's come from a psychology background as a mediator might be your preference.
There are just so many things to consider, aren't there? When you need some kind of service, and you know, you're looking at mediators who may not be lawyers or not worked in the legal system, but have some great skills and knowledge about what the mediation, where it can go and how it can take place and all these sorts of things. And also being aware of Do you want it online? Do you want that 90 minutes so that you've got breaks in between so that you can, go away and absorb the information that you have so that when you come back, you can then ask other questions. You can write yourself some notes. You can really think about it and then go again and probably get a really good result. Or you can go for half a day or a full day. And I'm sort of looking at the 90 minutes probably is a good thing for a lot of people because the emotion would be quite high. And I think that they need that time to walk away from it and have a think about what's really going on and what the real issue is and remove that emotion from it.
Yeah, true. Yes, lots of factors to think about instead of just jumping straight into something. It's good for me at the moment to point out as well that the process of mediation is not a legal process. It is a process of working out what you actually want and then negotiating for what you want in a process that doesn't care what your legal rights are as such. It is just there to resolve the immediate conflict. What you want may not be, for example, some kind of financial payment. You might want something to be done and you might want an apology. So if those are the things that you want, then going legal won't necessarily get you that sort of outcome. You need to look to an alternative to actually ask for that outcome because all the courts can really give you at the end of the day is a dollar amount.
There's so much to consider, really. So getting good advice, knowing what questions to ask to find the right person, the mediator, the lawyer, the whomever it may be, the service that you need, and having an understanding of what they actually do and what they can do for you is a really important part. And this is why you do what you do. I mean, you do live so that people can hear and they can ask you questions about different things that you have conversations about. And I think that, us having this conversation today is really important for those out there because there may be only one, there may be several that are considering something or they're going through a situation where they need some advice but they don't know where to go and get it. So let's share a little bit more of other things, please.
I think then preparing for the mediation was something that we mentioned as well would be helpful for people to know because preparation is one of the big keys in almost everything in life. So if you're ever going into anything important, you want to spend some time preparing. So you do need to think about what you want. You do also need to think about your own emotional state and about what may trigger you. And if something is triggering you, you need a couple of phrases to be ready so that you're not in an emotional state and unable to deal with the situation. You need to have thought of, look, I need a break. You need a way of easily asking for a toilet break or to easily ask, for example, for a one-on-one bit with the mediator, which the mediator will tell you they're able to do. So having those phrases ready and written down so that if you get triggered in your emotional state, you're still able to keep your level head enough to ask for that.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that you should do in preparation is never write down what your lowest settlement option is. I think you should always put a goal rather than your worst case scenario, because again, when your brain is in stress, it will attach to something. And if you've written down your lowest, like your cutoff, that's what you'll end up getting because your brain has gone for that in a state of stress. Whereas if you have a goal instead, your brain will aim for that. So it's a matter of having a bit of insight and a bit of working out how to deal with your emotions before going into these things as well. So preparing yourself. And one of the biggest skills is listening.
Listening. When you're in that emotional state, sometimes that doesn't happen very well, does it?
That's exactly right.
You think you hear something, but you don't really hear it. It just sort of goes over the top of your head.
That's right.
And you miss the important part
Exactly. Or you're sitting there already thinking about what you're going to say or respond, or it's more important for you to vent and get out what you need to say. But in fact, the superpower in mediation is to listen, because the more information you get, the more likely there's going to be something told to you that will clear things up and give you a pathway through to what you want.
Mm. And yeah, listening. It's a skill.
Mm.
It's a skill. And yeah, so okay, listening. Can miss a lot if you're emotional and you're just listening to the sort of the surface and not listening to really what's being said. What else is there?
Oh, so much.
Well, something that's important.
Yeah. Well, let's come back then to, you can find out a little bit more, because I'm always providing this sort of information. That's what Legally Wise Women's all about. Learning about how to access the legal system, learning about what questions to ask, where to start, instead of just going to your local lawyer first. There's a safe place for women to land and to start asking these things, so you're guided to the right place. So just like with finding the right mediator, finding the right lawyer as well, when you're ready to get legal advice or ready to engage a lawyer, is important. In terms of alternatives to going legal, maybe you do go and get some initial legal advice, but you don't actually allow the lawyer to run on. You get the options from your lawyer and you say, okay, that's great. I'm going to take these options away and think about them without actually engaging a lawyer on the spot. So again, you're quite able to do that. And a lot of people, I think, don't understand that they can say no and they can put on the brakes there. They just think, okay, the lawyer's given me a pathway, and the lawyer just takes over and off they go. So no, having some reins on the process. And when you go and see a lawyer should give you at least 3 options, because there are multiple options about different ways to proceed. And so if you have initial advice from a lawyer and they haven't given you 3 options, then I would say get second opinion. And just like with medical, we're more and more likely to get second opinions, but for legal, we're still not. I encourage people to get a second opinion because, as I said, when we were talking earlier about the AI, an AI tool doesn't have an agenda or some kind of other interest there. But a lawyer does have another interest. They're running a business. They want
to make money. Isn't that why people in business are in business, to make money? But it's also to provide a service and to develop that trust, which is a really important thing when you're in business. And particularly lawyers. I mean, some of them charge exorbitant prices for the work that they do. Yeah, they're qualified and they do this and they do that, but there's still no guarantee that they're going to win regardless of what happens. And you fork out a lot of money. So looking at really understanding yourself and how you're going to respond within a situation, you need to sort of sit down and really take a breath and think, okay, this is what I need, this is what I understand, this is what I don't understand, and really do that research so that when you do approach somebody, if they can't help you, then they can steer you in the right direction.
Well said.
Oh, thank you. But it really is important, and I think that it is important that we take responsibility for what goes
your life.
on. Yeah. And if we don't, we just got to suck up the consequences, don't we?
Yeah, unfortunately. That's the hard thing to learn.
Yep, it certainly is. What other things do we need? You keep saying there's so many things, and I know there are so many things, but the juicy bits, the important bits, so that people can get started on, if they're in a space where they need some help, they can get started on it.
We've given so many juicy bits and important bits. I haven't withheld the most juicy bits. I mean, where else can people start? I would generally say not with Google. Google is there to make money as well. So there is an agenda about what results you get on Google. the people who pay the most will pop up at the top of Google.
That's right. They do, don't they?
Yes. So if you really want a really comprehensive place that has a lot of the legal stuff, so if you want to dive into legal information, the Fitzroy Legal Service publishes a book called The Law Handbook, and it's all online for free. And there is so much juiciness in that. So how about there for a bit of juice?
That's great. The Law Handbook, the Fitzroy, what was
Legal
it?
Service.
Legal Service. That's a good place to start for anyone. But, 99% of people wouldn't know that until you just said it, which is a bit of a shame. Google's only as good as, I don't know what to say there, because if you've got published articles and things like that, that's fine. But people have opinions and they put opinions up all the time, or they're ready to give advice and not necessarily the right advice because it's their advice, their emotions, etc., maybe their experience. So therefore, you can go to Google and you can find a street direction, you can find this, you can find out what's on movies or whatever. But as far as the legal system goes, you need to go to the right places to get the right information. And that is so important. What is another tip, because we're coming up to news time in a moment, what is something that you could say or share with the listeners today about going legal, or if they need the legal services?
I would just repeat again what you said really clearly before about taking a step back to get out of that panic, because I also say it a lot that when you're in a high emotional state, you have low intelligence, you don't have access to most of your intelligent brain when you're highly emotional. So you do also need some other supports around you. Now, not only Google, but everyone has an opinion about everything. So having a support person who can be a sounding board rather than someone who's going to give you their opinion and try and solve your problems is the preference. Having potentially engaging a legal coach or a psychologist there in the background as well, because even if you do end up legal, your lawyer cannot be your psychologist, and that would become very costly very quickly if you try and treat your lawyer like your psychologist.
Yeah, true. So true. Thank you, Jacqui, very much. This has been a monthly tip with Jacqui Brauman, and she is the CEO of TBA Law and the founder and CEO of Legally Wise Women, where you can find all the information about how you can resolve issues before going to court or it costing you a lot of money. And to find Jacqui, Google Legally Wise Women, and you will find lots of free advice in there. And if you want to have a chat with Jacqui, then just send her a message. I'm sure she's got a message within the website that you can send her a message and ask a question, or contact her so that you can meet with her and ask her questions. Thank you, Jacqui. Thank you so much for your time.